Okay, we got the thumbs up. The flood question, you can talk to me about that afterwards or next week. That'll be a fun one for us to mention. They tell a story about a guy who was a severe alcoholic. On his way home, he passed by the bar. It was one of those things where he was walking home, right? He passed by the bar, and he normally tries to kind of walk away, but it won't hurt to just, step inside for a moment. He steps inside for a moment. And he's there and he's looking around and, well, I'll just take a seat. People are friendly. I'll talk. And so he sat down. He was talking with someone. He's like, well, I just won't order anything, But then he got to talking. One thing leads to another. And he's like, well, I'll just order something mild, just one. And that'll be it. And you can finish this story, right? Yep. Terrible story. What did the guy do wrong? Well, and when this story was shared with me, right? What's the answer of what the guy did wrong? I think wisdom says it's the way he walked home, right? He didn't have to. He chose to walk home by the bar. If you're an alcoholic, is that a good decision? Probably not, right? Wisdom would suggest you take a different route home because right, what you're tempted to. That's the conversation that I think is important for us as elders, that kind of wisdom. We look at our history, we know a lot more, hopefully, what God says. How do we apply that? Where do we apply that? How do we answer this person or don't answer this person? And I just think that's key. You want to look at any issues that we're going through today. One of the biggest ones that we all know about is human trafficking. That's a big one, right? That's a huge, huge situation that we are fighting today, right? Where does it come from? Well, that's where wisdom comes into play. A lot of people lovingly, wearing their heart on their sleeve, they want to go out and they want to make a difference, and by that they'll help to buy out a girl from sex slavery or something like that. But will they actually stop and think about where this comes from? And where does it come from? Well, we have a whole host of things, but right off the bat, I can tell you the porn industry is massive, and people in our churches are looking at porn. We're addicted. It's a hard thing to avoid. So that is feeding an industry that enslaves girls, right? And not just overseas, right here. And if we're really that worried about it, we've given handheld, sometimes I just call them porn devices because that's essentially what they are. We give these to our kids. The younger, the better. They all have them, and we know little about them. Our kids know more, and it's unrestricted, unlimited access to the worst content known to humanity. And we've just put it out there, right? Now, there again, I'm complaining. Sure, I am complaining. But at the same time, I also am identifying what I believe are the facts of the situation that help lead to human trafficking today. You want to fix human trafficking, you can't just buy girls out of slavery. That's dealing with the symptoms of a problem. You have to what? You have to go through this whole litany of things. You have to help get the girl out of slavery, show her Jesus so that she changes, so that she doesn't want to go back into slavery. Then you need to help the criminal justice side of things. Then you need to help stop funding the whole operation with porn in general becoming such a big thing. Then you need to get into foster care and adoption because that is half of their supply, as far as we know, coming straight from there. And they've got a whole recruitment ring going on. You've got to identify all the pieces of this puzzle. And what does that take? That takes time and that takes wisdom. And that's, in my opinion, the wisdom of the elders. You guys that our society needs to know about. Okay, sorry, you first. Then you.
Seth, as Marcus, I've been in a lot of trouble with this one. Not to worry, because nothing's changed. I mean, go back to the Roman Empire.
Absolutely.
There's no solution to these things. The only answer is God. And I made it funny. I remember when Mark was talking about back then in Haiti, when they went over and a lot of the food was, a lot of the stuff and the supplies were being confiscated. Whatever, right, Seth? And Mark said, I'm going to get into trouble because I think, don't get me wrong, it's important people need to eat, but it's more important we feed them spiritually. And that's really the answer. Because you know what? I can't tell you how many days of my life spent looking at whatever politics of the day. I mean, see what this impeachment stuff is garbage. We're getting so obsessed and worried about the solutions, and unfortunately, there isn't a solution. The solution is God.
The solution.
God's the only solution.
God is the solution.
Because this world is not going in a good way, but it's no different than it was back in the people back in the feudal times. They said, Christ is coming. Can't get any worse than this. And a lot of people thought that then.
Absolutely.
Today, we say the same thing. When he comes, we don't know. And we all feel that he will be here soon. But at the end of the day, it's a mess, Seth. It's
Absolutely.
just,
Absolutely.
everything's corrupt. Wall Street, political.
No. I agree. I don't think that's an excuse to resign ourselves.
No. We don't
And I know
resign
you're not
ourselves.
saying that.
No,
Yeah,
we never want to do that. We always
Absolutely
want
not.
to take the high road.
Absolutely.
But what I'm saying is, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Seems to me in this elders and transferring information to younger folks is two responsibilities there. One that the elders have to transmit the information, but the children have the responsibility to receive the
Yes.
information and act on it.
Yes. Like the analogy of the watchman, you can give the warning, but if they don't heed the warning, they're going to suffer, and it's not your fault.
And us as elders, if we don't give the warning, then
Yes.
it's on us. If we
Yeah,
give the
yeah.
warning and they don't receive it, it's on them.
Absolutely. But my kids have helped teach me this idea that, like, my son's constantly like, "Oh, I told you." I'm like, "No, he mumbled something under his breath. He didn't tell me anything, but he believes he told me," and that kind of thing happens all the time. So we have to be careful to know, am I communicating in their language, or am I just saying something to make me feel better? But okay, I did it.
That's what exactly what I was going to say is
Really?
you might tell a younger person something, but the way you're telling it, they're not going to receive it. because
Oh yeah,
you're
yeah.
not-
I've seen so many counselors too that they're like, "Oh yeah, we're just gonna help you with your cognition."
Seth, and I promise I'll be quiet after this, but at the end of the day, it's even worse. The technology that we looked at and all the good that it does do, we look at the negative side also. I mean, at least when kids were younger, and there was no televisions or whatever, the parents had a certain amount of control over what these kids could see. With these iPads and everything, these kids have access to pornography, and we don't even know about it. But go ahead.
You're right. We still have the exact same amount of control. We just don't utilize it.
That's right.
I have it in my house, and I can show you how to use it, and I can show you how much work it is too. But that's a
All right,
complete
go ahead.
sideline conversation.
I
So,
yield the floor.
oh, Lucas, no, that's all right. I just feel guilty because Randall's pointing out we need to cover more verses, right? What about these locusts, the gnawing locusts, the swarming locusts, all these different things? Well, Joel, I couldn't find it. Oh, sorry. He loves big markers. What Joel points out is these types of locusts, and they have, the way it was written in the commentary, they have crawling. Did you find it?
Nope.
All right. Crawling, we have consuming, we have chewing, and then we have swarming. And this gets into a whole discussion of locusts in general and what they do. So scholars tend to debate, what are we dealing with here? Are we dealing with 4 distinct phases? Okay, are we dealing with 4 distinct waves of locusts, species of locusts, stages of locust development, or where's the other one? Species. Anyway, what are we dealing with when we're dealing with 4? Well, and right now they're preferring the latter. They're thinking this is probably 4 stages of development in the life cycle of a locust. They say that an individual locust lives about 127 days. And by the way, do you know what a swarm of locusts actually is? I didn't know this. Did you know what a swarm of locusts is? It's grasshoppers.
Yeah.
It's just grasshoppers. But when they all come together in a giant swarm,
Yep.
it's locusts.
Yep.
At least that's what they were teaching us in class. So, okay. You can explain in better detail afterwards, right? So interesting. In 1889, evidently there was a massive swarm. It covered 2,000 square miles. Apparently they were common enough in Jerusalem at that time because Solomon, when he prayed his prayer at the dedication of the temple, 1 Kings 8:27, 2 Chronicles 6:28, he addressed the possibility of some disaster like a locust plague coming. And people pray towards this temple, God, hear from heaven, your dwelling place. So apparently it was not an unknown thing. People understood what these things do. So we have these stages, And there's a whole chart for this, but you know, the stage where they're crawling, they're consuming, they're chewing, and then they're starting to swarm, things like that. And we don't exactly know how these things break down, but it is interesting nonetheless, right? So we've got this locust plague that apparently was fairly common happening in that day and age. And so what they suggest with each of these is that at this stage, they're consuming just ground vegetation. By the time they've hit this stage, they're able to eat any form of vegetation, essentially, totally destroy it. Once they've hit this age, it specifically will attack branches. And then once we're down to here, they're mature completely, and they will be stripping away bark even at that point. So they'll just eat everything up. Now, verse 5 deals with the antithesis, the opposite side. And so we are going to move on to verse 5. Awake, you drunkards! Weep and wail, all you wine drinkers, on account of the sweet wine that is cut off from your mouth. So in contrast to the elders, the people who are leading, the people who should be most concerned about the imminent devastation, this terrible, terrible locust plague, we have the most unconcerned individuals on the planet. Drunk people, right? That's about as indifferent as I could think. How do you get the attention of a drunk person?
Tell them that the
Coffee.
locusts are eating that barley drops.
Yeah, you can tell them that.
Grapes.
The only way tell me if I'm wrong, the only way I know how to get the attention of a drunk person is to take away his drink. That's about the only thing I know. If you pull away his drink, that will get his attention, right? I mean, that's about the best way you can go, whoa, what's going on here, right? Well, guess what? God is taking away his drink. These locusts, they can come in millions and they can devastate a land. And like we said, they strip away even the bark. You will have nothing left. It's just incredible. I had a picture before. I don't have it up now, but you can't see. It looks just like a hazy cloud. And you can imagine how, if every single one of those things is just eating, you don't have food. And when you don't, your crops were how you ate, how you lived, how you got your alcohol and other things too, right? If you didn't have that, you're in trouble. So even the most indifferent in society are also going to be, they're going to have their attention taken from them as well. They're going to give attention to what's going on. So this is pretty significant. I think he's also talking about not just people who are drunkards in general, but people who would use wine to numb life or just try to distract from what's going on. All of a sudden, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So anyway, that's where we're going to leave off. So we started to cover a verse, but we're going to talk more about drunkards next week. So any questions or comments up to this point? Sorry we moved slow. We'll pick up the pace just a little bit. But like I said, I'm in no hurry. Please give me feedback, though.
I just wanted to verify we're meeting next week.
Oh,